The next chart that we're going to work on is the basic principles, concepts, and student inquiries template. This is a 3-column template with the first column being the basic principles of the field, the second column addressing the core concepts of the field, and the third being the inquiries, the questions that will be addressed through the unit of study. So you begin by identifying the core principles. One principle of gifted education, as I mentioned before, is the idea that gifted children need specially designed instruction in order to help them fully actualize their gifts and talents, as well as helping them to become socially and emotionally well adjusted. Well, packed within that principle are some key definitions, some key concepts. One of them being enrichment, that our gifted students need enrichment in order to fully understand the field, and the idea that because they're moving through the curriculum at a faster pace, because they're able to retain the information more quickly, they're able to acquire that information more quickly, that there all of a sudden becomes time within the school day and within the school year to offer our students additional enrichment materials that their regular peers simply don't have the time to include. There's also the concept then of social, chronological, and intellectual age, and the idea that they are often asynchronous within the body of a single student. So that the student might be, one age chronologically, a different age emotionally, and a third age entirely, as far as their intellect. And so, that would be a concept that builds into this principle of the fact that our students need specially designed instruction. And the specially designed instruction itself would be a concept that would need to be developed and explained to students of gifted education if you wanted them to understand this principle of being necessary for students to have that specially designed instruction. So in essence, the principles are the big ideas that you're attempting to communicate to the students. These are the core, enduring standards of the field that you are developing your unit around. The concepts then are the jargon. The concepts are the core terms and their definitions that students would need to understand in order to unpack the greater principle. Now, if all you do is give your students the jargon, if all they have are those core concepts, the problem is that becomes quite disjointed, and it becomes more of a knowledge level activity than a synthesis or an application level activity. So if you think about it in terms of Bloom's taxonomy, the concepts are that first level. The concepts are the building blocks that students would begin with. And those building blocks are at a knowledge level, but you need to then help pull those together into a synthesis or an application level, which becomes your principles, the bigger picture of how all those discrete elements come together. And finally, what you do when you've got all of these laid out is that you move into that far right column. In the far right column are what are the student inquiries and questions that can be developed to assist students in uncovering these ideas. These would be the questions that you would put up at the beginning of a lesson. You'd put up on the board so the students know what they're attempting to learn that day. And you may ask why these are put in the form of a question. Why not just leave them as the basic principles or leave them as the concepts? Questions seem to actualize our students' creativity. They force a student to wrestle with the information, to try to provide an answer, and then be able to compare the answer they came up with, or the lack of an answer, to the information they're going to learn that day. So often our students come to the classroom and they assume that they know it all, or that it's not important to them. But if we can again begin developing our units in such a way that they understand that the units they're learning about are connected to a larger discipline, which is part of a larger understanding of knowledge globally, then they've got a reason to know that this is a professional field that we're attempting to teach them. And then secondly, we put in the form of a question, they begin to be able to do some problem finding. They're able to identify their own sources of information and come up with their own understandings of it. So by placing the form of a question, we get our students involved in their learning, and instead of them being empty vessels to whom we're going to dump information, they become active researchers, active learners, active inquirers, and that's the goal. So we ask the question, how to identify gifted students? How do we assess students to determine their present levels of educational performance? And once we have those present levels, what educational strategy would be best employed to help those students develop their talents fully? What are the best educational methods that we can utilize that take all of the resources of the school and apply them to the needs of that particular individual? And so we begin to list a series of questions that the practitioners in the field wrestle with in order to come up with the or answer and respond to the principles and the concepts of the field. So that's what this form is designed to do. It's to help you lay out the concepts you want your students to learn, the principles that are built upon those concepts, and then the activating questions that will get your students thinking and involved in their own learning. So hopefully this particular template will be useful to you as you begin designing your unit plan. And again, as always, if you have any questions about this particular template, feel free to drop me an email